Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Max Verstappen has made a rather surprising admission about his RB21 for the upcoming season, suggesting he does not expect to be in the fight for victory in Melbourne next weekend, going as far to say that the curbs and the bump riding issues that the Red Bull has had over the last couple of years have not gone away at all. This is not far off an admission that effectively Max doesn't really think he's in this year's championship fight as it presently stands, and if Max can't do it, who actually can beat Lando Norris this year? Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new. As always, I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. We're going to start here. Cadillac are officially the 11th Formula 1 team for 2026. Now, you guys will say, I already thought we knew that, and we did. It was effectively confirmed in principle or something, but as of today, it is official that Cadillac will be the 11th team. For the first time since, what, 2012 or something, has there been more than 10 teams on the grid. I think, in my opinion, I'd like the ideal number to be something like 24 drivers on the grid, and with 12 teams, but 11 is better than 10, and it's nice. You're going to get 2 more drivers on the grid. How competitive are Cadillac going to be? We'll see. I think they're taking the Ferrari engines, aren't they, for 2026, with the intention to produce their own engine further down the line as General Motors. These are our current understandings of 2026 lineups. Of course, it's early days, and things could very much change, but these are the contracts we currently know. Just to keep in mind, by the way, George Russell is out of contract at the end of this year. It's not yet been confirmed what he's going to do in 2026, and apparently neither is Antonelli. So Mercedes could be changed. I think part of Toto Wolff's strategy there is, please Max Verstappen join Mercedes. So we'll see if that happens and what might occur if that does happen. But Cadillac need 2 drivers. There's been talks about Colton Herta because he's driven in their IndyCar program. There's been talks about Perez or Bottas or someone like that. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Before we go further, and speaking of George Russell, I wanted to go through some of the controversy today with Drive to Survive. So Drive to Survive launched today, and we saw plenty of clips arriving about this on the timeline. You know, look, I've not watched much Drive to Survive. I do find it entertaining. I think sometimes as like, you know, hardcore F1 fan, it can be a bit of a difficult watch. But I think this season's episodes, and what I've seen at least today, seem like there is a bit more behind the scenes action, like a little bit more of the type of stuff that F1 fans want than maybe we've seen before. I do find it hilarious though sometimes. I mean, they had this moment here where Buxton's talking about Max Verstappen having like an FU mentality. Here he is pushing Ocon all those years ago. Here he is winning the race and obviously yapping to his teammate on the radio. And then you get the contrast, and this is actually in the episode, I think, of Lando, you know, playing with some puppies and then kicking a football and falling over. So it's a really funny moment, right? Because you could obviously paint this picture either way. You could find images of Max Verstappen falling over, doing something silly, obviously playing with like a cat or with Pinelli. Like, you could make the picture the other way around, but you know, it's just the narratives that they're going to paint you. I thought was pretty entertaining, to be honest. Lando also said this in terms of his mentality. We know that there's been lots of talk about it, hasn't there, in terms of whether Lando has the dog within to win a championship, certainly against a guy like Max. If the car performance is substantially different, then sure. But even then, apart from Max, of the theoretical front runners, and apart from, frankly, Lewis, it's difficult to say which of those guys would be best positioned to actually execute a championship fight, because, you know, Leclerc at times, though I think he's better now, Lando, Russell, they've certainly shown cracks in crucial moments, shall we say. There was also this moment pretty funny. I like this kind of Zach Brown, Christian Horner underlying beef and storyline that's going around. Seems like Brown's been able to get under Horner's skin to a great extent. The other thing that I find so funny about these episodes is when the radio communications during the race situations are just, or even qualifying, are just not what would actually happen and what actually did happen. There was also talk about when Lando won in Miami and Max lost. Max wasn't really unhappy that weekend, right? Like, he was really happy that Lando had finally got a Grand Prix win, but instead they were splicing in images of following the Zandvoort Grand Prix where, of course, Lando dominated and Max wasn't able to win his home race that time, and Lando said, simply lovely or whatever he said down the radio. They spliced some images of that, so it wasn't really true. And then we had Russell getting overtaken by Hamilton last lap, last couple of corners at Abu Dhabi for P4, and apparently Bono was on the radio mid-overtake telling Lewis this is hammer time, right? There's just no way. So it's entertaining, I guess, is what you've got to accept it as. This is Jack Doohan. He was, of course, in Drive to Survive, maybe not in in Formula 1 for much longer. Do we take Ralf Schumacher's opinion too seriously? Maybe not, but apparently Australia could be it. Now, I don't know, what do you guys think? I think it's inevitable, probably, that Colapinto gets the drive instead of doing it at some point. How many races does he get? I don't know. But it does not look great, let's just say, for his future right now. We've got Ralf Schumacher saying that he might get one race. Okay, he got two because he raced Abu Dhabi, but not a great sign over there. Speaking of driver issues, Yuki Tsunoda, I thought some fascinating comments here from Honda, right? Because in many respects, Yuki is a Honda driver who is driving for Red Bull. Do Red Bull really want him? I mean, look, in my opinion, they probably should want him more than they do. They could have promoted him. They didn't. They've kept him at the B team. Their partnership with Honda ends at the end of this upcoming season for 2026. It's Red Bull powertrains, basically Ford. At that point, we wondered where Yuki would or could go. Is Tsunoda absolutely a Formula 1 caliber driver? Yes, in my opinion. Is he better than plenty of the drivers on the grid? Also, yes, in my opinion. Is it going to be easy for Yuki to stay in the sport? That may not be so clear because Honda say there's not much we can do for him, and going on to say that drivers can't rely on Honda forever. Someone of Tsunoda's career level needs to think for himself. Interesting statement, really, just because I don't think, I mean, maybe Yuki has been reliant on Honda to keep the drive. You'd think he's been keeping that drive at Red Bull on merit, but maybe not, and maybe it makes sense for Honda to keep him there because of the partnership, but of course, that's coming to an end. Honda are moving to Aston Martin, so you might think, oh, great, get Yuki Stroll's seat, but is that happening? No. Is Alonso going? Not for a driver who is not potentially capable of winning a championship. When Aston part ways with Alonso, they will want to sign Verstappen, and if they can't sign Verstappen, they will, sign someone like Russell or, like a proven race winner, stuff like this. Tsunoda's not in that kind of category, and therefore getting him to Aston, certainly with the Stroll situation, is difficult. The frustrating thing in many ways is that even without the Honda connection to Aston, Tsunoda for Stroll still makes sense. It's just not going to happen, right? Now, with 11 teams on the grid, there's maybe another opportunity there. We talked about Tsunoda maybe to Alpine, but I think Gasly's great, and it seems like they're going to stick with Colapinto. They've got a long year kind of deal with him. So tough to say where Yuki might go if Honda are saying, we ain't really going to help him out too much, and Red Bull are probably going to let him go after this year, especially because you've got Arvid Lindblad coming through the ranks. Certainly Red Bull will want to put him in the B team. Maybe Isaac Hadjar doesn't deliver and they keep Yuki, but does Yuki also himself want to stay for so many years in the Red Bull family where he's probably not going to get the promotion, and even if he does, the car might not be good anymore? That's also the other thing to consider going into the new regulations. Now, we will get into that just about now. This is pretty funny. Again, Hamilton's tried his best to get injured, isn't he? Like in Bahrain, he nearly fell off the golf cart or whatever, and I thought this was pretty funny. Hamilton's been driving, as this girl Luna says, for however many years, and still doesn't really understand that wheels can and will turn around. So maybe it was a stylish descent, but I'm not sure I'd call it that if I was Fred Vasseur. There was a bit of drama as well, just because Hamilton made the comment, a very interesting comment, and look, every team is going to gas up their driver pairing, certainly Hamilton with Leclerc. We know that, James Vowles said that he thinks his driver pairing of Sainz Albon is the best on the grid, but Hamilton says we have the strongest Formula 1 pairing that the sport has probably ever had. And this is quite the statement, right? We talked about it briefly yesterday. Of course, some might argue, well, it's not even the strongest driver pairing that Hamilton has had or been a part of, because you can look back at his, career with Alonso, with Button, with Rosberg, of course, as I mentioned yesterday, even with Russell in recent years, you might argue as well. But look, is it an incredibly strong pairing? Absolutely, yes. Hamilton has so much experience now. Is he as fast as he used to be? It's a question. Leclerc is excellent. I think it's also interesting from Hamilton on some level because, whatever you think about whether what Hamilton says is true, what he has effectively said is that Leclerc's better than Russell, right? Like he has, even if Hamilton believes that himself and Russell over the last couple of years were an incredibly strong pairing, he believes that himself and Leclerc are better. And is he right? In my opinion, probably yes. But it's still an interesting statement, and I do rate Russell highly, as you know, but I equally rate Leclerc incredibly highly as well. Now, speaking of Ferrari, their rear wing, we see some arrows on the screen and some dots and some numbers because they're talking about flexibility of the rear wing. Ferrari, though, reportedly already were kind of monitoring this themselves. The rumour has it, Red Bull believe that some sort of mini DRS related flexibility is being exploited at the rear wing of the McLaren and the Ferrari. Red Bull aren't very happy about it, and we'll discuss maybe some extended reasons for that here in a second. Ferrari, though, apparently they already monitored this. They believe they're going to be fine, but they will be getting a visit, we believe, from the FIA, and McLaren will as well, to clarify this stuff. So Red Bull has lodged an official and accusatory file against them, which is, of course, classic Red Bull. They've not necessarily got anything to lose for doing this, but I think it does at least paint something of a picture about where Red Bull currently believe that they are. If Red Bull were very confident they had the fastest car, would they be launching such a complaint? You know, not necessarily, not in my opinion. If they had the joint fastest car, would they be doing this? Probably, yeah. I mean, it's Red Bull, isn't it? They're going to try and play for every advantage they get, and fair enough. This is sport at the end of the day. But it does feel like, and many have commented this, that Red Bull are pretty concerned about the level of the current competitiveness, and they're trying, let's just say, every trick in the book in order to overturn it. I mean, let's not forget at the end of last season, there were rumours going around that Red Bull believed that McLaren were putting water into their tyres to prevent them cooling down at, for example, Singapore, when there was no tyre deck. And there's still a bit of a debate on whether Red Bull were entirely seeing ghosts on that, and whether Red Bull simply couldn't believe that their performance was so far behind the McLaren that McLaren must be cheating was the only reasonable explanation. So there's a feeling of whether that's happening again. Like, are Ferrari and McLaren actually do anything dodgy? Like, do they really have any mini DRS related tools? Or are Red Bull just, having difficulty accepting that they're simply not the fastest car anymore, and they're trying to find reasons why that could be the case? Whatever, the FIA are going to look into it, they're going to conclude something or another, but it doesn't necessarily change the competitive picture at the top end of the championship. And this is where we're going to get into some of these comments here from Max today, because I think it was a fascinating test in Bahrain. After the first day, Marco was giving it large. He was like, we've solved the car, it's fixed, Max is happy about it, it does what he wants. Max seems happy about it as well. The car wasn't, absolutely rapid, but it looked like it was a step up, let's say, on what we saw previously. Over the last couple of days of the test, though, Red Bull had more difficulties to deal with. It's, of course, a brand new concept, they say, anyway, in terms of the car looks the same. But apparently under the bodywork, it's a different way of generating the performance. So they've got lots to learn on that, and fair enough. But the attitude definitely changed. I mean, Verstappen seemed really confident over the first day or two. Marco was very confident over the first day or two. And at the end of the test, it seems like Red Bull know that there's a lot of work to be done. And maybe part of that is just because at least at the end of the second day, McLaren really showed their hands in the Lando long run. And that was particularly impressive. So Marco goes as far to say this: you have to say Lando Norris is the favourite. If you look at the data from the test days, you have to conclude that McLaren starts the season with a lead. Now, of course, every time we mention McLaren this year, there's going to be a debate, and a fair debate, on, well, where's Oscar in this discussion? Because if Lando's really the favourites, then, how close should Oscar Piastri be? What does that look like in terms of that intra-team rivalry this year? I find it pretty fascinating. You guys know my opinion that I think Lando is the superior driver, certainly for now, but we'll see how that plays out this season. Of course, Oscar will be in his third year in the sport. You'd expect him to kick on, but I expected maybe a bit more of him last season, to be perfectly honest. Not hating, just my personal opinion. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. However, what does it mean for Max? Because Marco was suggesting here that Lando's the favourite, but let's not forget Max is the reigning four-time consecutive world champion. Martin Brundle says that until you see Max not winning, it's difficult to predict against him. Like, the guy has led the World Championship for well over 1,000 days. That may come to an end next weekend if he doesn't win the Grand Prix. But Verstappen says, yeah, McLaren are the favourites, and goes as far to suggest that we will not be able to fight for the victory on Australia. Now, Max also made some interesting comments going into testing. He actually said that before he turned up in Bahrain and drove the car for the first time, that he doesn't really have any goals for the year. And it's like, well, hang on a second, you just won 4 championships. You're trying to win 5 in a row, something only Michael Schumacher has achieved. And like, you're not got any goals? Kind of implies that Red Bull weren't sure. After the first day, it seems somewhat better. but then it got a little bit worse. So Max said a few interesting things on the car here to Viaplay. This, I think, was an especially telling one. In terms of balance, it might be better as a whole going into the corners until mid-corner this year's car compared to last year's car. But on the other hand, there are always still issues such as the curbs, the bumps. It's not our biggest strength. And this is not something we've really heard before. And of course, Bahrain isn't exactly the best circuit to test it on. But even the all-conquering RB19 struggled with this in Singapore famously, as we know. Max has still never won around there. And maybe that's not going to change this year on this evidence because, yeah, the car was struggling big time. We know over the curbs and the bumps. It was even true in Miami. Let's be real. Probably the reason why Lando won that race. The car was struggling through that tricky chicane at the end of the lap. Max eventually runs over that bollard and, things change. Eventually, safety car happens. Lando wins the Grand Prix. But nonetheless, he reckons that the car still has those weaknesses inherent. Have they solved all their problems? Seemingly no. I mean, Pierre Wache said it the other day as well, that Red Bull, yeah, they've made progress with their car. They believe their car is 3 to 4 tenths of a second quicker than it was back in Abu Dhabi last year. But in Abu Dhabi last year, they were arguably 3 or 4 tenths of a second away from the McLaren, away from the Ferrari. So, that's not enough of a gain, let's be honest. And the car still has similar characteristics to last year's car, although it may be significantly better in some regards. It simply may not be better enough, I think, is the current realization. So Max says that winning in Australia, there is too much work to do for that to happen. Now, he's not writing off the possibility of winning the championship, but it's not that far away. He's saying that the car isn't good enough. We have problems that we've still suffered from the last couple of years. Currently, in terms of performance, they're not going to be good enough to challenge for the win in Australia. Look, it's a very, very long season, but Red Bull also have to think about next year's title as well, especially if Max has a bad start. They might need to think about, okay, well, how do we keep hold of Max? Maybe we need to think about next year, so, we can convince him we're going to be competitive so he doesn't leave. Difficult to say, really, what you do. Am I ever going to count out Max? No, because even if the car is slower than Lando, do I count on Verstappen to execute very consistently? Yes, absolutely I do. And who knows, maybe after Spain, the technical directive comes in, maybe Red Bull becomes substantially stronger. But there is a real feeling that the start of the season for Red Bull is damage limitation, and a podium for Max in Australia, let's say behind the two McLarens, would be an excellent result for him as it stands. And that's, concerning in terms of Verstappen's chances of winning the title again. Goes as far to say that McLaren are the favourites. We had hoped to be closer to them, but that is not the case yet. Now, where Red Bull are compared to the other teams, we don't really know. They think they're behind Ferrari, apparently. Who knows where Mercedes are in the conversation? Of course, McLaren are very quietly confident. Mercedes haven't said anything like this, really. I think Mercedes even believe they might be there. Of course, every team is going to say that McLaren are the favourites, but for Max to say that, yeah, we're not going to be able to win in Australia is relatively damning. Now, it might rain. There could be weather conditions. There could be chaos. Max may capitalise as he has done many a time before. But in terms of Max leading the championship 5 races into the year like he was emphatically last year, that does not seem likely this time around. He goes on to say, how many teams can fight for the championship? At the moment, only one. It's got a nice colour. It's orange. They are clearly in the lead. So that's where it sits with Max Verstappen right now. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's the question I raised at the start of the video. Okay, if Max doesn't really think he's going to be able to challenge Lando for the title because the machinery isn't going to be good enough, then who realistically can? Is Piastri going to be competitive enough this year to make it happen? And then maybe it comes down to the Ferrari duo, maybe even the Mercedes, duo as well. I don't think Antonelli, let's be real, is going to be able to win a title fight. Probably not even be in one. Russell could, if the Merc is good enough. I think that would be a fascinating dynamic. But if Max can't win it, and Lando is the clear favourite as a result of that, yeah, I think you've got to look at maybe the Ferrari guys to deliver the most serious challenge. Unless, of course, Piastri takes a substantial step this season. My perspective is I'm not going to rule Max out until I see him mathematically ruled out of the championship or the car struggles at the start of this year as it did towards the mid-late part of last season. But still, intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below, because not often you hear Max say, yeah, it's not looking good. It's not looking good. And that's the way that Red Bull currently see things. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.